Hello and welcome. He's not willing to compromise his art and has sometimes spent years raising funds to make movies the way he wants to, with a meaningful story and a message that touches on both good and bad in human nature, from slavery to colonialism. This week on One on One, meet the Ethiopian director, storyteller and philosopher Haile Gerima. Born in Gondar, Ethiopia in 1946, his early life was centered very much around his large family. Haile Gerima was one of 10 children born to a mother who worked as a teacher and a father whose creativity was expressed through his writing, giving the young Gerima a chance to watch his father's plays and even perform in them. His grandparents were also a big influence on him and gave him a sense of the tradition of storytelling that formed a core part of Ethiopian culture. Gerima emigrated to the USA in 1968 in his early 20s to study at California's UCLA Film School, quickly realizing that Africa held little interest for the Western film industry. Though making America his base, Gerima regularly returned to Ethiopia to make stories touching on grassroots issues such as exploitation of poor laborers, black urban life, and even critique of the country's political history. His best-known film, the 1993 drama Sankofa, focused on slavery. The breadth of Gerima's work over the years means the philosopher, writer, producer and director is one of the few Africans to gain international recognition in this profession. Irrespective of that, he still calls himself a third-world independent filmmaker. Haile Gerima, it's good to have some time with you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. You're a truly independent filmmaker. I mean, quite a rare breed in this sense that you're not willing to compromise, to go commercial or to be handcuffed, I guess, to the commercial system. So who do you make your movies for?
Well, it would be very maybe inappropriate to say for myself in the sense that, I come into motion picture having literally derailed from my own sense of my own historical cultural context. And so everything I miss about, as I grew older, everything I miss is really about stories of my ancestors, stories of my people, stories that literally resonate within me. And so I can say it's for me, but it's also too bourgeois to say I make a whole film, which is a costly medium for myself. But I think what I've learned from my first utterance in film is the fact that those people, if I'm hungered of some subject matter, I find a common collective population that equally is hungered for the story I tell. That gave me my earlier encouragement. And so I find people who are hungered for stories that I am, producing.
In a way that obviously includes a lot of the African-American population, the black population.
Yes.
It's interesting because you're quite straightforward in your viewpoint. You say white people are spoiled,
Oh, very, because everybody wants to appease and say, when a young person or even any age person begins to entertain a film idea in the head, they start to say, well, if I get a white person in the story, it becomes more valid movie commercial. So all the entrappings whisper to you to bring a white person, to pair your characters, to be sanctioned by white characters. But again, this is just a formula Hollywood has over the years developed. Even when they do historical films about Gandhi or anybody, you have to have white actors that sanction the story.
And you say white people can be courageous and cross over.
Yeah, they can. And they are. I mean, even in my own case, I have an African-American base in America, but progressives, very inquisitive, courageous white people cross over to see my movie, and have always interacted without a problem. But I think by and large, there's a whole corrupting implication that has come with the whole idea of white supremacy in cultural outputs that I refuse to accept.
But you say you don't make movies to appease black people or black needs.
Oh, no. Even black people, I mean, for me, they're the most uncomfortable in my movies, but I do not compromise them by making that be, let's say, releasing whites from the responsibility, which often is the case of black filmmakers. They will usually, as you critically portray a given black character, you appease the white characters for many considerations.
How frustrating does it get, though, to keep that independence by having to go out there and raise the money? I mean, you really do have to go out there and scrape it together.
I do, and usually I don't waste my time in the U.S. because I think especially the kind of subject matters that I'm interested, African American and African subject matters, do not have that much financing opportunity in America. So what I do is go to Europe and interact and struggle and transaction with European producers. It takes me 9 to 10 years to put together the finance, but I'm very contented.
How locked up is the Hollywood, the sort of Western film industry? How much does it lock out independents like you?
Oh, very, very. One, it's a very dictatorial arrangement. Even when they talk about, I don't know if you know this, usually Hollywood, not necessarily as a human being, but the mindset. They would say to you, what's the point of entry? When they say, what's the point of entry, they're saying, who's the white character that we need to have now for these natives to be amplified in that story? And that is racist. That's the very initial discussion all filmmakers have to go through, that who is in it. When they say who is in it, is really they're saying who's pairing this black, this native, this Arab, this etc. And so it's a very bad arrangement and racist when it comes to when you're dealing about race issue. It keeps holding your story hostage to paternalism, and therefore the very objective of wanting to break barriers, bring human beings together gets compromised.
Tell me about those early years being one of 10 children in Gondar in Ethiopia.
Was my favorite time when I just did a film in the very location I grew up, and it was amazing how the earth itself has changed. When I grew up, on weekends we lived on wild fruits, and now when I was shooting this new film, 90-something% of those wild fruits do not exist. And so for me it was my happiest time. I felt, because I was happy there, I don't have to be happy anymore. In fact, I live off the happiness of my childhood that kept energizing me in this so-called complicated, complex world that continues to incur into your possibility of happiness.
Being such a big family, was it financially a struggle to keep it all together?
Oh yeah, my father was working with the Ministry of Education, but in a very low budget. It's like you may not get everything, you may not get new clothes all the time, but it's a very happy childhood, happy parents. My mother actually saved me from really destroying myself because I was the most energetic one.
How did your father influence you? What sort of character was he?
He was a very quiet guy. He didn't brag, talk too much. He did. He's a man of action. He wrote a lot for the kind of resource that was available to him. He published few books, but there are still a lot of manuscripts he left us to publish. And he was a good storyteller. The whole town in Gondar literally admires him and follows him, and where they go to this honey wine places where they sit down. Wherever my father is, that's where the people went to hear humorous jokes of past and wax and gold, we call it, discussions with settled meanings in them, where community collectively archive things. And so he was a very powerful storyteller.
Which is big for you, isn't it? Storytelling is the key, you say, to filmmaking.
Oh yeah, that's that's what I cultivated early. In fact, before I came to you, I was really working on this chapter. I'm writing the making of Sankofa, and so I was working on this whole area, how earlier around the fire, my grandmother, this is pre-electricity in our house, my grandmother and her storytelling, who is his mother, and how much he has inherited from her is also an amazing transaction. And so I grew up around storytelling. Every night, all you have is stories.
You say it's healing as well.
Oh, very healing, and also it exorcises, I would say, the negative aspect of your life, because all of us come with good and evil. And I think the storytellings are therapeutically, they strip out of your system the evil aspect of being human. And they're therapeutic. In the end, this is really how I see film itself.
What made you move across to America, to Chicago? You went to Goodman School of Drama when you were 21.
Yeah, I was what you call the Kennedy children, or Eisenhower came a little bit earlier. But the Kennedy time was the whole idea of America was a larger empire, and Ethiopian educational infrastructure had brought a lot of Peace Corps. Any Ethiopian that went to America returns to a privileged status. In anything you want to do, had you been dunked in American educational degrees, you're better off in Ethiopia. And so it's that kind of cultural environment that obsessively drove me to go to America.
But you realized once you were there, and you went on to UCLA as well, that you could be a filmmaker, not just work in theater, because that was your original plan, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, theater was what I was studying, but really film was accidental. I was just standing a little bit. I had an incident with the theater arts department at UCLA, and accidentally I was standing where semester end students were screening their projects, and I realized I should try this one. So my thing with film was accidental.
But when you went to California, I guess you discovered Hollywood wasn't really for you.
No, but by that time, I think I have been, once I got to Chicago and racism began to negate my own humanity, not only as reflected as the African descendants, but even in my own personal life. Because when I first went to Chicago, on the outskirts of Chicago, I did gardening for my financial needs. And I have gone through my own personal, not as in the way African Americans or Native Americans or Chicanos go through, but I got my share of confrontation with racism where it negated me, because I grew up amplified. I did theater, I did in Addis even, and the Haile Selassie University. I was active in the theater department. And so here I come to a country that completely omitted my own existence and denied me to be a person even. Forget storyteller, forget theater, drama. I even began to doubt my quality human being. And those confrontations led to my completely escaping from Chicago. Suddenly I escaped and went to California, went to UCLA and just enrolled in the theater arts department, trying to run away from what I faced in Chicago in the theater and racism and the way parts are given, etc., etc.
We'll find out more about what happened in a moment. More questions for Haile Gerima in just a moment. Stay tuned. You're watching One on One.